Hi, I'm Adam Porter, and this is my top 100 all-killer, all-filler board games, and today we're looking at numbers 30 to 21. So these are games which have short durations, simple rule sets, and portable packages, the sort of things you wouldn't normally see in a top 100 list. And at number 30, we've got a real classic from Zoch Verlag. This is Pickomino, otherwise known as Heckmeck and Bratvermeck. This is a game by Reiner Knizia. It's a dice game. You're rolling dice in order to try and claim these tiles from the grill, and these are your chickens, right? You're trying to claim grilled worms from this grill in the center of the table, and you do this by rolling dice. And you can keep all dice of one number, put them to one side, and then you can choose, do you want to roll again and try and increase your total or not? But you can never add to the number that you've already taken. So if you've already taken 3s, you can't take any more 3s. So next time you might want to take 4s or 2s and so on. But if you ever roll and you go bust, right, that's no good. You've now got to return one of your tiles to the grill. So you don't want to go bust, but you also need to make sure that at some point you've put some worms, a dice with a worm result, into your selection. How long can I keep going to get the highest number possible to claim the highest scoring tile from the grill and put that onto my stack? But you can also, if you roll the right number, you can steal a tile from somebody else's stack of grilled worms. And at the end of the game, you're going to score points according to the numbers of the tiles in your stack. It's a really good classic Reiner Knizia game, one of his best really, but you don't hear about it talked all that much online because it's so simple, and light games don't get talked about as much as the big strategy games like Tigris and Euphrates or Ra or Modern Art. Okay, but this is just as good, it's just in a very different genre. Next on the list at number 29 is a little tiny game from AEG called Dice Heist, another game that's entirely overlooked, this one by Brett Gilbert and Trevor Benjamin. I think this is a fantastic mechanism. I think it's one of those obvious mechanisms you can't believe someone hasn't done it before. We're essentially trying to collect sets by stealing them from this museum of these nicely drawn artworks and you know, decorative items and so on. And the way that you do it is each museum has a number assigned to it, and you're going to roll a die and see if you can beat the number of that museum in order to take all the items that are laying there. But if you fail, you don't get any, and then more items are going to be added, so the pot gets better and better for the other players. If you think, do you know what, I don't want to take my chance right now, what you can do instead is just take a second die from the supply, or a third die, and until you've got a nice little handful of dice that you can roll in order that one of them hopefully beats the results needed for those museums and take these pieces. And you score in various different ways, for having the majority of certain things or having sets of matching items, all those usual sort of set collection things. But that central push your luck mechanism of, is now the time to go for it, or do I keep on building up my dice so that I've got a nice pool of dice when I really need it to get that biggest selection of goodies. So that's Dice Heist. I think it's, yeah, really overlooked. I'd love to see this come back. This should be, you know, I'd love AEG to do another version of this, okay? They do super simple stuff now, like Point Salad. This is just as good. In fact, it's better. It's higher on the list, okay? But it could equally fit into the yellow mini-games range or the Helvetique range. I keep saying this, don't I? These are all the sort of obvious places where you put a game like this. Maybe Amigo Spieler in their little range. But it needs to come back, it needs to get more recognition, because I think it's great. Number 28 is another absolute classic. This one is called No Thanks, although I've got a German version with a different title, and I've got great artwork on mine. I absolutely love my edition of this. I'm so glad to have the Amigo Spieler version. In this game, you turn over a card from the deck, and then you've got to decide, do I take that card or do I leave it there? Because I don't want it. And if you don't want it, you've got to put a token onto it. And then the next player gets a choice. Do they want it? And if not, they put a token onto it. Eventually, somebody will take that card and all the tokens that come with it. And then, I mean, that's it. You work through the deck of cards, everyone gathers these various different cards, and then you're going to score positive points for the cards that you have in front of you, but you want to have the lowest score. You win by having the lowest score, so positive points aren't good. The great thing though is that if you have a run of cards, a run of consecutive numbers, only the lowest number in that run actually scores any points. So you want to build up sets of cards that are close to each other in value so that you can have this consecutive run. And also any tokens that you take, they're subtracted from your score as well. and then at the end, the person with the lowest score wins the game. It's an absolute classic, and I think this Amigo Spieler edition is just brilliant. I just love the artwork on it. But whichever version you get, even if you get one just with numerical design, you know, it's still engaging enough game that it's lifted above that sort of abstract presentation. Number 27 is San Juan, which is the card game version of Puerto Rico. I love that central mechanism where we've got a bunch of different actions available to us. So I could, for example, take the build action and place one of my cards as a building. And when I do that, I get a better version of that action than everybody else. Everyone else does the build action as well at the same time. Or somebody else might do the sell action. Well, they get a fantastic version of the sell action. They can sell multiple things. I can only sell one thing. Okay, so if you take the action, everyone else gets it, but you get the best version of it. I believe it's called the follow mechanism. And it works really, really well in San Juan. I also really like the multi-use cards. Sometimes your cards are buildings. Sometimes they're resources produced by those buildings. And when you sell them, you gain more cards, and that's the currency you use to buy buildings, right? So the cards are used in all these different ways, and ultimately we're building up sets, and you score points for the cards you have in front of you, and the sets of cards, and the resources, all this stuff at the end of the game. Number 26 is Dobble. So Dobble is the new Snap. Okay, I think the Dobble is everywhere. You see this in supermarkets. I see kids playing it in you know, cafes, in wherever they are. You know, people love Dobble, and there's many different versions of Dobble out there. It's so clever, Dobble. What you do is you turn over a card, and any two cards from the deck will have exactly one matching item on them. One matching item, and you've got to find that item and call it out before the other players in order to win the card and score the points. That's it. Shouldn't be difficult, right? But it really is. Sometimes you can all be staring at these two cards, trying to work out where's the matching item, and nobody can see it. And your brain tells you there's a mistake here. This one's wrong, because there is no matching item. But there always is. You look long enough, you'll find it. And so it's a frantic race. All the different themed versions don't hurt, you know, all these different intellectual properties. Star Wars Dobble, Harry Potter Dobble, you know, you can get any type of Dobble, Disney Princesses Dobble, anything, you know, and that doesn't hurt. Nice little tins, cheap affordable packages, multiple different versions of how to play it, but all very simple. It's great. It's great for children, but also it's a fun, frantic thing for adults to do as well. Number 25 is a two-player classic. We've already talked about some two-player classics like Hanamakoji and Fox in the Forest, and I added Jekyll versus Hyde into that mix. I hesitate to call that one a classic just yet. I'm not sure it's been quite recognised as such. Jaipur was another example, but Lost Cities is one of the forefront of this. This is Reiner Knizia's absolute two-player couples games classic. This is a game where you've got a bunch of different coloured sort of missions, and you're going to choose to go onto some of those missions by playing cards. When you play a card on a mission, you can only play higher numbered cards after that, and your score for that mission is going to be the total of all your cards, but you're always going to subtract 20. As soon as you start a mission, you've got minus 20 points. If you don't start the mission, you don't get the minus 20 points. So you've got to work out how many missions am I going to go on? Am I going to be able to beat that 20 points? Because don't forget, your opponent is going to be trying to complete the same missions, and they're using that same pool of cards. So if they've got all the red cards, well, you're not going to beat that 20 points, you're going to end up with minus points. There's also this sort of wager card, a handshake card that you can put down before you start a mission, and that doubles your points for that mission, whether they're positive or negative. Or you can put down multiple, that trebles the points or quadruples the points for that mission. But if you're doing that, you've got to be sure that you're going to achieve positive points, because you double it or treble it and then you find you've got negative points, well, now you've got a problem. When you play a card, you can either put it into the mission or you can put it into a central discard area, which makes it available for the other player to draw into their hand. And so you can kind of hang on to cards that you don't really need, but you know the opponent needs, just to prevent them getting it. It's a really good push and pull, tug of war type game, trying to complete these missions, working out how many shall I go for, am I stretching myself too thin? A real classic. Number 24, another two-player classic. This one is Patchwork, but this one isn't a card game. It's a tile-laying polyomino game from Uwe Rosenberg. And so you're trying to fill out your grid with all these little pieces of quilt in different Tetris-type shapes, and in order to take a shape, you've got to pay a certain number of buttons. That's the currency in the game, is buttons. And every now and then there's an income phase when somebody crosses a certain area on the track, and you're going to get a load of buttons based on the pieces that you've got on the board in front of you. The other currency is time. So when you take a piece and place it onto your board, it'll have a little timer on it, and that moves you a certain number of spaces up the track, right? This time track. And the player who goes next, there's only 2 players in this game, remember, the player who goes next is always the person who's furthest behind on the time track. And so if somebody takes a tile which pushes them way up the time track, it might be several turns before they get another turn. So somebody might take 2 or 3 tiles before the other player gets another turn. At the end of the game, you're going to score points for the buttons that you've got, and you're going to lose points for the empty spaces that are still left on your grid. It's a really fun, fairly simple little puzzle. It takes up quite a lot of table space because you've got to lay out all of those polyomino tiles, but it comes in a neat little package. And they've started to do lots of extra versions, a Halloween version, a Valentine's version, a Christmas version, all this sort of stuff, because it is just one of those classic couples games, great for a gift, great for families. I think it's becoming one of the evergreens. Number 23 is Vampire Queen. This one is from Schmidt-Spieler. It's a climbing game by Wolfgang Kramer. And I've shown you lots of climbing games on this list. This is very, very similar, right? You might play a pair, and everyone else has to play pairs, but they've got to try and beat your pair. You might play 3 of a kind or whatever. You're playing all these various different sets, and the other players then have to try and beat these sets. You go around the table once, and then there's a trick-taking element to it as well, which is when you play a vampire hunter, then we do this little sort of trick-taking thing where we've got to try and play different cards, and I'm not explaining this very well at all, but essentially we've got a mixture here of climbing and trick-taking, different phases that happen throughout the game. It's got fantastic presentation to it. I think it's great. This is Vampire Queen. Number 22 is Captain Carcass, also known as Dead Man's Draw. This is a straight push your luck game. You're turning over cards from the deck on your turn, and you can keep turning as long as you don't get 2 matching cards. If 2 matching cards come out, you lose all of them. But every card you turn over in this game has a little power, a little ability, and they're really chaotic. You're stealing cards from the other players, you're shifting cards around on the table in front of you. So some of the cards that you play mean that you've now got to play at least another couple of cards. Some of them match up, the key and the chest, and allow you to gather other cards. You're trying to build up sets in front of you in order to score points. It's got lovely artwork. Whichever edition you got, the Dead Man's Draw version has nice artwork, as well as this Captain Carcass version that I've got. Very chaotic, very silly, but it works great for families, it works great for adults. It's just a perfect filler if you're happy to have a lot of that, take that and not take it too seriously. And finally, at number 21, we've got Heckmeck and Karteneck, and you'll remember that I've just already mentioned Heckmeck, or Pickomino. Well, this is the card game version, also from Reiner Knizia and Zoch Verlag, and I actually prefer this to the original dice game. In this version, we're sort of auctioning off those tiles with worms on them, whereas in the previous version we were rolling dice to try and equal their total. Well, here we're sort of auctioning them, and Reiner Knizia knows how to do an auction. So you lay out tiles equal to the number of players, and then you're going to play sets of cards, and you're going around the table. So unlike in Pickomino, where you've got to wait until someone's finished their turn before they take something and then it's your turn, here we play in sequence. So somebody plays 2 2s, the next person plays, a couple of 3s, and so on. And then you can add to your pool. So I've played 2 2s. Well, now I'm going to play, a couple of 4s, and we're building up our total, competing with each other in order to be the first to select from the worm portions that are on the table in front of us. But you can never put more of a certain type down, as in the original game. So if I've already played 2s, I can't play any more 2s into that selection. And in order to have a valid bid for those worm portions, I've got to put some worms into the mix. And so, when somebody passes, when somebody can't increase anymore, then they just have to take the lowest valued worms from the grid. There's the same sort of thing as in Pickomino. If you play the right total, a matching total, then you can take a tile from somebody else's grid. And the whole game just works really, really well. It's really, really smooth. And I like the fact that I find this more interactive than the original Pickomino, in that you're not waiting for your turn. Your turn comes around really quickly because you're gradually building up these sets rather than rolling dice, re-rolling, re-rolling, re-rolling. There's my set and here's my outcome. So, I think both games are great, and which one you prefer is going to depend whether you prefer dice rolling or card playing. But I think Heckmeck and Karteneck surprised me with how good it was, as a re-implementation of the original game. And so that takes us to number 21, and once again we're going to look at patterns in my list, which designers I've been enjoying, which publishers, which themes and mechanisms. And for designers, you're not going to be surprised to hear that Reiner Knizia is out in the lead with 7 games. He's only secured his lead, really, hasn't he? He's had a good 10 with the 30 to 21. Haim Shafir has 3 games, Bruno Catala has 3 games, Uwe Rosenberg is now in there with 2, and Wolfgang Worsch with 2 games. For publishers, well, there's no upset here. Amigo is still in the lead with 11 games, Zoc Verlag with 9, NSV with 4 games, Helvetique now has 4 games in the list, Lumberjack Studios still have 3, Gamewright has 3, Jolly Thinkers has 3, and AEG has 3 games in the list. For themes, well, there are now 18 themeless abstract games in the list. There are 12 with anthropomorphic animals, 6 about fantasy, 4 about farming, 4 about food and drink, 3 games about Japan, and 3 games with a spooky theme. And for mechanisms, well, trick taking is still out in the lead with 11 games, dice rolling, there's 8 games with that, there's 7 push your luck games, and there's 7 climbing games, and 5 roll and writes. And so we've now only got 20 games to go, another 2 videos, so please come back and join me for the next 10, and I'll see you next time. Until then, all the best.